sweet voice, of which Peter Barron had caught the accent, not from her singing, for she only played, but from her gay admonitions to her child, whom she occasionally allowed to amuse himself, under restrictions very publicly enforced, in the tiny black patch which, as a forecourt to each house, was held in the humble row to be a feature. Jersey villas stood in pairs, semi-detached, and Mrs. Ryves, such was the name under which the new lodger presented herself, had been admitted to the house as confessedly musical. Mrs. Bundy, the earnest proprietress of No. 3, who considered her parlours, there were a dozen feet square, even more attractive, if possible, than the second floor with which Barron had had to content himself, Mrs. Bundy, who reserved the drawing-room for a casual dressmaking business, had threshed out the subject of the new lodger in advance with our young man, reminding him that her affection for his own person was a proof that, other things being equal, she positively preferred tenants who were clever. This was the case with Mrs. Ryves. She had satisfied Mrs. Bundy that she was not a simple strummer. Mrs. Bundy admitted to Peter Barron that for herself she had a weakness for a pretty tune, and Peter could honestly reply that his ear was equally sensitive. Everything would depend on the touch of their inmate. Mrs. Ryves's piano would blight his existence if her hand should prove heavy or her selections vulgar. But if she played agreeable things and played them in an agreeable way, she would render him rather a service while he smoked the pipe of form. Mrs. Bundy, who wanted to let her rooms, guaranteed on the part of the stranger a first-class talent, and Mrs. Ryves, who evidently knew thoroughly what she was about, had not falsified this somewhat rash prediction. She never played in the morning, which was Barron's working time, and he found himself listening with pleasure at other hours to her discreet and melancholy strains. He really knew little about music, and the only criticism he would have made of Mrs. Ryves's conception of it was that she seemed devoted to the dismal. It was not, however, that these strains were not pleasant to him. They floated up, on the contrary, as a sort of conscious response to some of his broodings and doubts. Harmony, therefore, would have reigned supreme had it not been for the singularly bad taste of No. 4. Mrs. Ryves's piano was on the free side of the house, and was regarded by Mrs. Bundy as open to no objection but that of their own gentleman, who was so reasonable. As much, however, could not be said of the gentleman of No. 4, who had not even Mr. Barron's excuse of being littery. He kept a bull terrier and had 5 hats, the street could count them, and whom, if you had listened to Mrs. Bundy, you would have supposed to be divided from the obnoxious instrument by walls and corridors, obstacles and intervals of massive structure and fabulous extent. This gentleman had taken up an attitude which had now passed into the phase of correspondence and compromise, but it was the opinion of the immediate neighbourhood that he had not a leg to stand upon, and on whatever subject the sentiment of Jersey villas might have been vague, it was not so on the rights and the wrongs of landladies. Mrs. Ryves's little boy was in the garden as Peter Barron issued from the house, and his mother appeared to have come out for a moment, bareheaded, to see that he was doing no harm. She was discussing with him the responsibility that he might incur by passing a piece of string round one of the iron palings and pretending that he was in command of a gee-gee. But it happened that at the sight of the other lodger, the child was seized with a finer perception of the drivable. He rushed at Barron with a flourish of the bridle, shouting, "Oh, gee-gee!" in a manner productive of some refined embarrassment to his mother. Barron met his advance by mounting him on a shoulder and feigning to prance an instant, so that by the time this performance was over, it took but a few seconds, the young man felt introduced to Mrs. Ryves. Her smile struck him as charming, and such an impression shortens many steps. She said, "Oh, thank you, you mustn't let him worry you," and then as, having